What would make a king stop mid-step, glance at his own son with narrowed eyes, and whisper to his guards, "Open the trunk"? Not the sight of Harry himself. The prodigal prince had returned before. Not the fact he came alone. Meghan was often the ghost at royal events. No, it was the feeling that something was off. That this visit, despite the rehearsed smile and sheepish charm, wasn't just about reconciliation. It was about something else entirely. And by the time King Charles raised the car's trunk lid with his own two hands, in front of a line of stunned security officers, press liaisons, and a furious Prince William just steps away, it was already too late. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. The damage had begun. The royal family had weathered scandal, betrayal, even exile. But this was different. Because what they found inside that trunk didn't just trigger a family argument, it sparked a palace war. And what Prince William did next? Well, even Charles hadn't seen that coming. Why was Prince Harry really in the UK? Why did he arrive in a vehicle no one could identify, with luggage marked only by nondescript tags and a second, unlocked security detail? And why, in the middle of a private family reconciliation, were there multiple pieces of high-end media equipment in his car? Not just cameras, not just microphones, not just hard drives, but full-on production-level kits, the type used for unscripted doca footage, Netflix-grade gear, and it was all hidden in plain sight. Let's rewind, because the lead-up to this explosive moment wasn't just about a trunk, or a brother, or a betrayal. It was the culmination of everything the royal family had tried to suppress for years: secrets, side deals, and silent cameras. And now, every lens was pointing back at them, even the ones they didn't know were there. 2 days before the trunk incident, a courier arrived at Clarence's house. No return address, no formal seal, just a red ribbon, subtle, elegant, quietly deliberate. Inside was a note written in Harry's own hand. "Pa, I want to speak. Just us. No press, no agendas, just family." Those words stirred something in King Charles. Regret? Longing? Weakness? No one can say for certain. But one thing was clear: the king said yes. Against his aide's better judgment, against William's direct protests, against the advice of every legal and media strategist in the monarchy. The king, the man who'd seen his family torn apart on tabloid front pages, believed, for one fragile moment, that reconciliation was possible. He cleared the calendar. He prepared Windsor for a discreet, unpublicized visit. He even instructed staff to remove the press photographers stationed near the private gates. After all, this was about healing. About mending what had been broken. But you know what they say? When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. Harry arrived in a black Range Rover that no one recognized. It wasn't part of the royal fleet. It wasn't his known California rental. And it wasn't marked with diplomatic clearance. That was the first red flag. The second? His security team wasn't his usual unit. These weren't the well-trained, ex-Metropolitan Police officers that had accompanied him on previous trips. They were younger, sloppier, less polished. One of them dropped a bag while unloading the car. A camera tripod spilled onto the gravel. An aide saw it, mentioned it, was ignored. Charles stood by the entrance, ready to welcome his son. But William watched from a window upstairs, arms folded. He'd seen this before. Not just the setup, but the strategy. The charm, the vulnerability, the timing. He knew something was coming. Why does this story matter now? Why should we care what was in that trunk? Because this wasn't just a brotherly visit. It was the final collision between two worlds, one bound by centuries of tradition, the other built on contracts, cameras, and clicks. This was about trust. And trust, once broken, doesn't get restored with a hug and tea. Especially not when it's caught on tape. Remember, Harry and Meghan's Netflix deal wasn't just about past events. It was about access. Exclusive, private, never-before-seen access to the inner workings of the monarchy, behind closed doors, during real moments, with raw emotion. The type of content streaming giants pay millions for. The kind you can't get unless someone on the inside lets you in. So when Charles opened the trunk and saw the black Pelican cases, the kind production crews used to transport fragile media tech, his face shifted. Not in anger, in disappointment. And that, according to one palace aide, was worse. He turned to Harry and asked, "What is this?" Harry's reply, "It's just backup gear. My team handles it." But William wasn't having it. He stormed down the stairs, didn't wait for pleasantries, and walked straight to the vehicle. Then he turned to the royal guards. "Check the entire car. Now." An order, not a request. And for the first time since the Queen's passing, the guards hesitated. 2 sons, 1 king, 1 trunk, and no clear protocol for betrayal. Is this what family reconciliation looks like? A silent war of glances, hushed arguments behind stone walls, and equipment that shouldn't exist on royal grounds? You have to ask yourself, who benefits from this footage? What was the real plan here? Did Harry bring it without Meghan's knowledge? Was he set up? Was it truly an innocent oversight? Or was this part of a new documentary pitch, one allegedly titled Royal Truths? Rebuilding a Family. Quietly circulating in LA? Rumors suggest Netflix had grown frustrated with the lack of new content. They needed fresh drama. They needed tension. And Harry's return to the UK? That was their golden ticket, whether he knew it or not. What makes this moment different from everything before? It wasn't public. There were no crowds, no interviews, no press releases. This was supposed to be private. And yet, somehow, every detail, from the bags to the car model to the exact arrival time, ended up in a leak to the press within 48 hours. Which begs the question, who tipped them off? Who gave that courier Harry's note? And who, exactly, packed the trunk? You might think William's reaction was excessive, kicking his brother out of the palace? Over equipment? But to understand his rage, you need to understand what was at stake. This wasn't just about a reunion. It was about the Queen's legacy, about Charles's health, about Kate's delicate recovery, about the quiet dignity the monarchy had managed to claw back after 2 years of bombshell interviews and explosive memoirs. All of it was hanging by a thread. And now, with a single trunk click, it was all unraveling again. What came next? Let's just say, Harry didn't leave quietly. William didn't back down. And Charles? He made a decision that could shift the balance of the entire monarchy. One that royal insiders are still debating. One that the public may never fully forgive. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Because before we reveal what was found beneath the spare tire, before we unpack who actually ordered that camera gear, and before we show you how the footage, yes, there was footage, ended up online, you need to see exactly how it all unfolded, moment by moment. Because behind every royal photo op, there's a shadow story. And this one might be the darkest yet. What happened next wasn't in any press release. It wasn't captured by the official royal photographers. But it was recorded. Not on a phone. Not on a palace cam. On something hidden. In that trunk. And when it was finally played back, the monarchy would never be the same. What would you do if the brother you once defended on national television, the man who once stood beside you at your mother's funeral, suddenly reappeared at your front door with a camera crew hidden in the trunk of his car? Would you open your arms? Or would you open the gates, just to slam them shut behind him? Because that's exactly the choice Prince William faced. And the truth is, he didn't hesitate. It began with a whisper. A few royal aides had seen the email chain. One flight manifest. One unexpected arrival. One line buried in the schedule notes. Private visitor, HRH Duke of Sussex, Windsor access only. That was it. No press release. No formal announcement. Not even a phone call. Harry had arrived. Uninvited. Or so it seemed. And this time, he wasn't at Heathrow. No, not the usual route. He came in through a private airfield outside Oxfordshire. Quieter, less monitored. A blacked-out SUV met him straight off the tarmac. License plates unfamiliar. Royal tracking services had no record of it being part of the Crown's fleet. And perhaps most curiously, no Meghan. That alone raised eyebrows. Was this a surprise attempt at reconciliation? Or a calculated move to shift the narrative? Because let's not forget, just 6 weeks earlier, Netflix executives were reportedly threatening to reevaluate the Sussex content pipeline unless new material was produced by Q1 of 2026. And here Harry was, showing up at Windsor, just as the palace had let its guard down. From the outside, it looked ordinary. A Range Rover pulling up the long gravel road. The hedges trimmed, the gates wide open. Windsor Castle basked in a rare streak of winter sun. But inside, tension crackled like an electric fence. William stood at the window, jaw tight, arms crossed. Kate, resting in her quarters after a string of quiet recovery weeks, was advised not to attend any family confrontations. She hadn't seen Harry in nearly a year, and frankly, she didn't want to. Neither did William. Because in his mind, Harry hadn't just left the royal family. He had weaponized it. And this sudden reappearance? It didn't smell like peace. It smelled like press. The car slowed to a stop in the courtyard. Harry stepped out. He looked calm. Too calm. Dark jeans, navy sweater, sunglasses tucked into the neckline. A studied casualness. The kind worn by men who know cameras are watching, even if no cameras appear to be present. He smiled at the staff, gave a small wave, said, "It's good to be back." But no one smiled back. Not really. Because Harry wasn't just the king's son. He was the walking reminder of every televised accusation, every bombshell interview, every line from Spare that had shredded royal reputations like wet paper. And this private visit didn't feel private. It felt staged. Charles approached from the east corridor. Slow steps, back slightly hunched. The air around him heavy, not from age, but from emotional fatigue. You could see it in his eyes. The desire to believe in his son again, fighting against every instinct warning him not to. He extended his hand. Harry shook it. There was no hug, just a nod, and a single phrase whispered low. "I'm here for you, Pa." No agendas. But then Charles glanced behind him, and that's when he noticed it. The car's trunk, still closed, still latched, still untouched by staff, which was odd, because usually Harry traveled light. One duffel bag, maybe two. Yet this time, the rear compartment sagged under weight, as if something heavy, very heavy, was packed inside. Charles paused, then turned to the nearest guard and said, "Pop it open." Now here's where things truly start to spiral. Because within seconds of Charles making that request, Prince William was on the move. He descended the stairwell with the energy of a storm cloud. Eyes fixed on the vehicle. He didn't greet Harry, didn't nod at Charles, didn't ask what was going on. He didn't need to. He already knew. Or at least, he believed he did. Flashback to earlier that week. William had received an anonymous message, a cryptic tip sent through a trusted source close to the BBC. It read, "He's coming. They're filming. Check the trunk." No sender, no signature, just that. At first, William ignored it. Paranoia, he thought. Until now. Until this exact moment, standing before the very car that had just crept past centuries of protocol with no prior vetting. And now, the king himself had requested the trunk be opened. Was it divine timing? Or had someone planned it? A staff member stepped forward. He pressed the release button under the hatch. There was a brief click. And then, the lid lifted. Slowly, like the rising curtain before a tragedy. Inside were 4 large matte black cases. Thick, industrial, not Louis Vuitton, not Goyard, not anything luxurious. These weren't personal bags. These were production cases, each one lined with hard foam, each one locked with steel latches. And on the corner of one, a small white label. One word, ACM. William's voice cut through the air. "What is this?" Harry shrugged. "Security stuff. Tech gear." William stepped closer. He tapped one of the cases. "Then why does it say ACM?" "That's an A camera, Harry. That's primary film equipment." Harry's smile faltered. "Not mine. My guys packed it. I didn't check." "Didn't check," William barked. "You flew across the Atlantic with 4 sealed production cases, and you didn't check?" A silence fell over the courtyard. Even Charles looked uneasy now. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was something else. Let's pause for a moment. Imagine you're in William's shoes. Your brother has already given multiple tell-all interviews, written a memoir accusing you of physical assault, questioned the entire institution you were born to protect. Now he's back, with gear capable of recording, secretly or otherwise, your father, your wife, your staff, your home. Wouldn't you be furious? Wouldn't you question every word out of his mouth? Wouldn't you see the entire visit as a setup? Because that's exactly how William saw it. He turned to the royal security officers. "Search the vehicle, top to bottom. Remove the equipment. Log every item. I want a report within the hour." Harry raised a hand. "Will, come on." But William cut him off. "No, you don't get to will me anymore. Not after what you've done. Not after what you've filmed." Then, the line that froze the staff. "If you brought Netflix into my house again, if you thought you'd catch us off guard, you're not just leaving. You're done." Charles finally stepped in. Enough, he said, with a tired growl. But even he didn't stop the search. Even he couldn't justify those cases. He simply turned and walked away, shoulders heavier than before. And Harry? He just stood there, alone, in the courtyard, with the gear still being pulled from the trunk. One box, then two, then three, and then the fourth box opened, and inside, not just camera gear, not just mics, not just batteries, but something else, something much more dangerous. Because nestled between the foam and cables was a folder, plain, unmarked, but sealed, with a wax stamp, the kind used by Kensington Palace. And what was inside that folder? Well, that's where things go from awkward to explosive. What if the thing that unravels a kingdom isn't a scandal in the tabloids, but a folder? Just a plain, silent, sealed folder, pulled out from the foam casing of a film equipment box in the trunk of Prince Harry's unregistered vehicle. No camera flash, no viral tweet, no dramatic leak, just a wax-sealed envelope. And yet, when the guards saw it, they stopped breathing, because that wax stamp, the one imprinted in dark red and pressed clean, wasn't just any symbol. It bore the unmistakable crest of Kensington Palace. And worse, it was William's personal seal. Let's rewind 10 seconds. The last camera case had been unlatched under William's watchful eye. He wasn't leaving anything to protocol. No staff oversight. No half measures. You open them now. All of them, he'd snapped. Two guards knelt beside the final case. They removed foam padding, audio equipment, chargers, adapters. Then something shifted, just slightly, underneath. A corner of paper. Just barely peeking through. Not taped. Not protected. As if it had been slid in hurriedly. Almost like it wasn't meant to be there at all. One of the guards carefully lifted it out. And there it was, the sealed folder. No name. No return address. But the wax? Clean. Precise. Kensington's crest. William's own. Harry's face dropped the moment he saw it. He didn't speak. Didn't blink. Didn't breathe. And that, more than anything, confirmed it. This wasn't part of the security team's kit. This wasn't something Netflix had mailed in. This wasn't an accidental mix-up. This was something far more delicate. More deliberate. William stepped forward, nostrils flaring. Where did you get this? No answer. He took another step. Harry, where did you get this? Still silence. A single bead of sweat trailed down Harry's temple. Then came the words, low, shaky, quiet. I didn't pack the case. A storm of emotion flashed across William's face. Disbelief, rage, hurt, but above all, exhaustion. This wasn't just about the folder. This was about years of betrayal, years of being caught off guard, years of watching his brother choose cameras over kin. And now, a folder, bearing his own crest, had surfaced in Harry's possession from inside a trunk full of recording gear. Let's pause, because you're probably asking the same thing the guards were silently thinking. What was in the folder? What could possibly be so important, so sensitive, that its discovery would cause two royal brothers to stop in their tracks? Was it a private memo? A future announcement? A media contract? Or something else entirely? We'll get there. But first, what happened next was just as important. Because for a brief, chilling moment, William genuinely considered something he never had before. Removing his brother not just from the palace, but from the line of succession. I want this entire vehicle impounded, William said to the guards. No one touches it except for palace intelligence in my office. Charles, now returning after a tense phone call with Camilla, overheard the command. He stepped in. William, no. But William didn't flinch. Father, we can't ignore this. Charles looked at the folder, then at Harry, then back at William. His voice softened. I know, but this is family. Family. That one word that had become a wound. A sharp-edged irony. Because if this was what family looked like, who needed enemies? Harry finally broke his silence. I didn't steal anything. That folder was sent to me. I didn't ask for it. By who? William asked sharply. I don't know. You don't know who sent you a sealed Kensington document, and you just stuffed it in a film case? Harry's face reddened. I didn't stuff it anywhere. My team. No more excuses, William snapped. This isn't about your team. This is about you. This is about you showing up here, again, with cameras, crews, and now this. He held the folder in the air. This isn't reconciliation. This is espionage. That word, espionage, it hit harder than any insult could, because it wasn't just a metaphor. It was now a legal possibility. And royal protocol has very strict definitions of what constitutes internal intelligence breaches. Harry, the once beloved brother, the war hero, the outcast turned storyteller, was now dangerously close to becoming something else. A threat. At this point, whispers started to swirl through the courtyard staff. No one dared speak, but glances flew. This wasn't a private family spat anymore. This was beginning to look like a full-on internal security breach. And the worst part? No one could tell if it was intentional. Harry tried again. Look, I came here to fix things. That folder, whatever it is, it wasn't my idea. I haven't even opened it. But William wasn't budging. He stepped toward his brother, voice tight, almost trembling. You have no idea what's in this, do you? Harry said nothing. William leaned in closer. What if it's confidential? What if it's Kate's medical files? Or financials? Or correspondence meant for the king? His voice cracked slightly on that last word. And for the first time, Harry looked ashamed. Not defensive, not performative, just ashamed. Charles gently placed a hand on William's shoulder. Let's not do this here. William handed the folder to a staffer. Take this straight to the internal review office. No copies. No digital scans. I want eyes-only protocol. Yes, sir. And someone, he added, turning sharply, needs to find out if the rest of these cases have anything else tucked inside. But even as that investigation began, quietly, swiftly, under heavy guard, the damage was already done. Because whatever shred of trust had remained between the brothers had now been incinerated. And Charles? He looked like a man breaking in slow motion. He turned to Harry. His voice was barely above a whisper. Why didn't you just ask to come without all this? Harry's reply? He didn't have one. He looked down, shoulders slumped, as if the weight of every headline, every rift, every burned bridge had finally landed on his back. Too late. William walked away. No more words. No more glances. No more brotherly ties. He disappeared into the corridor, slamming the door behind him. And just as Charles started to retreat too, emotionally drained, physically limp, a single guard called out from the SUV. Sir, we've found something else. Charles froze. So did Harry. The guard waved a small plastic evidence bag. Inside, a device, no bigger than a coin. Sleek, silver, unmarked, but unmistakable. A microtransmitter. Harry's voice was hoarse now. That's not mine. Charles closed his eyes. This was no longer about family. This was about containment. And what they discovered when they turned that device on wasn't just shocking. It was damning. And it wasn't the only one hidden in that car. Or the palace. How many times can you forgive someone before it stops being mercy and starts becoming foolishness? That's the question Prince William asked himself in the moment he saw the microtransmitter held up by the royal guard. The same transmitter pulled from the SUV his brother had rolled onto palace grounds under the pretense of peace. But this wasn't peace. This was war. And William, once hesitant to be the aggressor, was now past the point of tolerance. He had tried. God knows, he had tried. He had defended Harry when the press labeled him the reckless one. He had shielded him after the Las Vegas scandal. He had sat in a funeral pew beside him, even after the Oprah interview blindsided the entire institution. But that last thread, the one tying loyalty to brotherhood, had just been cut. By wire. By deception. By recording equipment. And now, William was done being the calm one. The diplomatic heir. The peacemaker. That mask had shattered. And underneath it was a man who had just been violated by his own blood. Let's set the scene again. The microtransmitter wasn't just a passive recording device. It was live. That's right. Live. The palace's internal IT team confirmed it within minutes. The device had been transmitting audio in real time from the moment it crossed the gate. But to where? That's the part no one could answer. The signal was encrypted, bounced through multiple relays. Whoever was on the other end had planned this well. And as William heard that confirmation, his fists clenched so tightly his knuckles went white. Where are the others? He barked. The guards didn't hesitate. At least 2 more have been found in the rear compartment. One embedded inside a power strip. Another inside the lining of a bag labeled security. Harry, standing 10 feet away, looked stricken. Whether it was guilt or panic, no one could tell. William turned to him. You recorded us? Harry shook his head immediately. No, I didn't even know those were there. I swear. William snapped. Don't you dare insult my intelligence. You show up unannounced, with unregistered gear, unvetted staff, and now you expect me to believe you had no idea your car was bugged. Harry stepped forward, desperate now. I didn't come here to hurt anyone. I came here to talk. To fix things. William cut him off with a laugh. Bitter. Cold. Hollow. Fix things? You brought hidden microphones into Windsor Castle, and you call that reconciliation? Charles watched, silent. He looked older by the minute. Lines deepening under his eyes, jaw clenched with the quiet agony of a father watching his sons implode again. But this wasn't like before, because this time, there was physical evidence. This wasn't he said, she said. This was real. One of the guards approached William again, speaking quietly. We just found a third device in the west corridor, stuck behind the radiator near the Queen's drawing room. William turned pale. That room had only been used in recent days for private family discussions, including conversations about Kate's ongoing recovery, about succession protocols, about the King's will. And now, those moments might have been heard by people far outside palace walls. William turned to Harry again, and for the first time, he didn't raise his voice. He lowered it. Quiet. Icy. Controlled. Do you realize what you've done? Harry opened his mouth. William didn't let him speak. You didn't just violate me, or our father. You violated the very institution that gave you your name, your security, your identity. Harry blinked, stunned by the venom in his tone. You've handed our enemies exactly what they've been dying to get for years, a window inside these walls. Inside our heads. Then he took a step closer. You want to be the outsider, Harry? Fine. But you don't get to sit at our table and record our words for your next documentary. Not while you're being funded by a company whose only interest is tearing this family apart. That last line landed hard. And for a moment, Harry looked like he might cry. But William wasn't finished. He turned to the head of security. I want him removed from the premises. Now. Charles's eyes widened. William. No, William snapped. I warned him. I told you this would happen. I told you letting him back in without vetting was a risk. But you didn't listen. He turned to Harry again, voice trembling. You used to be my brother. My best friend. A pause. And now you're just a walking liability. The guards hesitated. They looked at Charles. The king gave a reluctant nod. Harry didn't resist. He nodded once. Bit his lip. Didn't speak. Didn't argue. Just turned and walked back toward the vehicle now surrounded by tech staff and royal aides. His suitcase was handed to him. His coat. His phone. But not his dignity. That stayed behind, shattered on the gravel driveway. But here's where it gets darker. Because just as Harry approached the vehicle, one of the tech staff pulled William aside. Sir, we think we found the feed destination. William's heart pounded. Where? The aide whispered 2 words. California. West Hollywood. William's mouth went dry. Netflix. The aide shrugged. We can't say for certain, but the IP address routes to a building owned by one of their contractors. It's likely. William didn't speak for a long moment. Just stood there, eyes scanning the SUV, the gravel, the faces around him. And then, Harry, still just standing there, watching him. Not fighting, not fleeing, just watching. And that was the final straw. Because for William, the truth was now blindingly clear. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't an accident. This was a chess move. And if Harry was capable of making this move, then what was next? The palace could survive scandals. It had survived Diana's interviews, Charles's leaked tapes, Andrew's disgrace. But it couldn't survive a mole. A recorded, monetized, streamed mole. Not now. Not when the monarchy was already walking a tightrope between relevance and extinction. As Harry climbed into the SUV, William whispered something no cameras caught. But a lip reader in the crowd would later claim he said, You've chosen your kingdom. And it isn't this one. Then the door shut, and the SUV rolled away. No escort. No farewell. Just silence. But as the car disappeared down the palace drive, William turned to his father and said the words that would ripple across every royal corridor. He's not coming back. And then came the echo none of them heard at the time, a soft click. From a bush. Near the courtyard. Another device. Still live. Still recording. And this one wasn't Harry's. But what it captured would change everything. Have you ever seen a royal guard hesitate? Not blink, not flinch, not adjust posture, but hesitate. It doesn't happen, because palace guards are trained to act swiftly, precisely, without emotion. Their job is protocol, not opinion. But on that cold afternoon, as Prince William pointed directly at his own brother and said the words, "Escort him out of the palace," the guards didn't move. Not immediately. They looked at each other, then at King Charles, then back at William. Why? Because for the first time in royal memory, the monarchy had turned on itself in public view. And there was no precedent for that. Let's be clear, removing a royal from palace grounds isn't just a security action. It's an act of sovereign authority. It sends a message, not just to the public, but to the entire world. It's the modern equivalent of exile. And when the order came from William, the man next in line to the throne, there was a ripple effect that no one could control. Because William didn't whisper the command. He declared it. Loud, clear, furious. Remove him. Now, Harry had already stepped back from the SUV, stunned into stillness. The microtransmitters had been enough to set off alarms. But now, with the added revelation that a fourth device had just been found, this time buried in the hydrangea bushes near the Queen's private entrance, the palace was on lockdown. Not just logistically, emotionally, politically, symbolically. This was no longer about brotherly tension. This was about espionage, infiltration, breach. And William? He was done entertaining theories. This was an invasion. One guard finally stepped forward. A younger one, clearly fresh in the role. He looked at Charles, awaiting confirmation. And here's where the drama intensified. Because Charles didn't say a word. He just stood there, paralyzed, caught between two suns, between duty and love, between king and father. The silence was heavy. Until William said it again. Father, he has to go. Charles exhaled slowly, a breath full of regret. Then, a single nod. It was barely visible, but it was enough. The guards moved. They surrounded Harry, not with aggression, but with unmistakable intent. One guard gently reached for his bag. Another gestured toward the security gate. Harry didn't resist, but his eyes, they burned. Not with guilt, not even with fear, but with something harder to read. Resentment? Or something worse? Betrayal? Because here's the twist that no one, not even William, anticipated. Harry didn't know about the fourth device. Not the one in the garden. Not the one that was still live, transmitting footage in real time. And most importantly, not one connected to his team. Because while everyone pointed fingers at Harry, the real snake in the grass had just gone unnoticed. Let's talk about the fourth device. It was disguised as a garden rock. One of those hollowed-out landscaping props, commonly used in film production to hide mics. It blended so seamlessly with the terrain that only a misstep from one of the security dogs had revealed it. The dog tripped over the hollow stone, causing it to shift, revealing a black interior compartment. Inside, another transmitter. And this one wasn't broadcasting to California. No, this one was sending data to a secure IP registered in Germany. When Palace IT traced the connection, the address was linked to a European media archive, a location previously tied to leaked footage from the Princess Diana tapes. That changed everything, because it meant one chilling possibility. Someone other than Harry was also recording the palace, and they'd been doing it for a very long time. Back to the courtyard. Harry was being escorted gently toward the security gate. William stood tall, arms behind his back, expression unreadable. But when Harry turned to look back, just once, he said something no one expected. 3 words. You were right. It stopped William cold, just for a second. Then Harry added, almost in a whisper, but it wasn't me. William's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. He had already made his choice, and Harry was already halfway down the drive. Inside the palace, chaos was brewing. Charles returned to the east corridor, flanked by aides and advisors, his face drained. Shut down all comms, he ordered. Scrub every guest access point. I want every visitor re-verified, including staff. The Lord Chamberlain nodded. But sir, what about the footage? Because yes, footage had already leaked. Only minutes earlier, a 17-second clip appeared on a fringe European gossip site. Grainy, angled, distant, but clear enough to show William standing in the courtyard, pointing directly at Harry and shouting. The audio wasn't clear, but the body language? Explosive. And now it was viral. Within 30 minutes, hashtag Palace Standoff was trending on social media across Europe. UK networks were scrambling to confirm sources. American late-night shows were already lining up monologue jokes. And Netflix? Their legal department sent an immediate email. We are not affiliated with any recent footage or recordings. The Sussex contract has not been renewed. That line sent a jolt through the Royal Communications Office. Wait, the contract had not been renewed? Then, why would Harry be recording? Unless he wasn't. Meanwhile, in the palace's underground security hub, 2 audio engineers played back the final signal from the Bush device. The last 10 seconds were critical, because they picked up a whisper. Faint, muffled, but human. Not Harry's, not William's, not Charles's. A woman. And what she said chilled everyone in the room. They're blaming him. Good. They'll never suspect the real plan. Cut to outside. Harry's SUV passed through the outer gates. One guard saluted as it rolled by. Harry didn't return the gesture. He was staring at his phone. A new notification had appeared. From a blocked number. Just a single line of text. It's not over. Check the second case. He blinked, then turned to his assistant beside him. Wait, did anyone pack a second camera case? The assistant frowned. We only brought one. Harry's heart dropped, because there had been a second case. Back at the palace. Sitting quietly on the opposite side of the trunk. Never opened. Never even noticed. And if what he suspected was true, then the real betrayal hadn't come from inside his SUV. It had come from someone still inside the palace walls. And that second case? It was about to be discovered. But not by the guards. Not by Charles. Not by William. No, it would be found by someone else entirely. Someone who hadn't said a word during the entire standoff, but had watched it unfold from behind a cracked door. Someone with a long memory, and a sharper instinct for deception than anyone in the room. Princess Anne. And when she opened that second case, the truth would hit like a thunderclap. What if everything you believed about betrayal turned out to be incomplete? What if the one person the world was pointing fingers at, the man branded a traitor, a sellout, a spy in royal robes, wasn't the architect of the chaos, but its target? Because in the next twist of this royal saga, the question that had haunted William's mind and plagued Charles's heart would shift. Not, why did Harry record us? But, what if Harry was being recorded too? And the answer would shatter what little trust remained in the House of Windsor. Let's rewind just 20 minutes. As Harry's SUV slipped through the Windsor gates, a message had lit up his phone, sent anonymously. It's not over. Check the second case. Harry stared at it, face pale, mouth slightly parted. Second case? He only remembered one being packed. The Pelican-style gear case his LA team had prepared for personal use. Tripods, batteries, power adapters, backup chargers for his security detail. But a second case? He turned to his assistant. You're sure we only had one case? The assistant nodded. I packed it myself. Harry's eyes darkened. Then someone added something. Meanwhile, inside the palace, the atmosphere was brittle. Royal security was performing a second sweep of the courtyard. Staff were being re-cleared. Charles had retreated into a private drawing room, speaking softly with Camilla behind closed doors. William, pacing in the communication wing, was drafting a formal statement. He wanted to control the narrative, to get ahead of what would inevitably become a global media storm. But as protocol scrambled to stabilize, one person moved in silence, unnoticed. Princess Anne, the steadiest royal. The one who watched, while others reacted, and had just reviewed the preliminary scan logs. Something caught her attention. Vehicle entry data, 12:42 p.m., she murmured. 2 hard cases logged. 1 unpacked. 1 not accounted for. Her eyes narrowed. Without a word, she turned sharply and headed back toward the inspection bay. No entourage. No guards. Just intuition. And that's when she saw it. Behind a stack of hastily removed equipment, partially obscured by foam and wires, sat another identical black case. No label. No tags. No customs clearance slip. It hadn't been touched. Hadn't even been opened. And for some reason, no one had noticed. And crouched beside it, unlatched the metal locks, lifted the lid, and froze. Inside wasn't camera gear. It wasn't microphones. It wasn't media files. It was worse. It was a field-grade surveillance kit, complete with multiple encrypted hard drives, a satellite uplink dongle, and a pre-configured audio routing device programmed to mask signal origin. At the very bottom, a slip of folded paper. Typed. No signature. Just 5 words. Asset B, deliverables in progress. And stared at it. Her breath caught. Asset B. Not Harry. Not the Duke. Just Asset B. Like a subject. Like a project. Like a target. And that's when the penny dropped. Harry wasn't orchestrating this. He was being used. Back in the SUV, Harry was now reviewing past messages on his phone. He pulled up a note forwarded to him weeks ago from a Netflix liaison, a reminder that new material deadlines are approaching. The line that stood out? Unscripted access equals maximum value. Raw moments. Unfiltered. He remembered brushing it off. He'd told them repeatedly, no hidden recordings. No palace footage. No backroom content. Not anymore. But now, looking back, what if that reminder wasn't just pressure? What if it was a hint? What if someone, somewhere, had taken that suggestion into their own hands and planted the second case to do it? Harry sat back in the seat, staring out the window. He whispered to himself, "They were never filming with me. They were filming around me." Let's talk about the psychology of betrayal. There's the betrayal you commit, and the betrayal committed in your name. The second is far more dangerous, because it muddies intent. It manipulates perception, and it turns you into the scapegoat for someone else's agenda. And in this case, it worked brilliantly. While everyone focused on Harry as the villain, the real operators had slid through unnoticed, cloaked in assumptions, hiding in shadows, pressing record. And the palace, fractured as it was, had played right into it, and returned to the main corridor, carrying the case by herself. William spotted her. "What's that?" and didn't answer. She opened it on the table between them, laid out the contents. Slowly, methodically. When she unfolded the Asset B note, William paled and stared him down. Her voice was sharp. "Your brother didn't betray you." For a moment, William looked like a child who'd just broken his favorite toy. Eyes wide, face frozen. He opened his mouth, closed it again, and added, quieter now. He was being baited. Charles entered moments later, summoned by an aide. When he saw the case, his face dropped. "This wasn't ours?" he asked. "No," and replied. "Then whose is it?" and exhaled. "We're about to find out." She gestured to the tech team. "Scan the hard drives. I want full metadata. If someone's been capturing footage, I want timestamps, device signatures, and routing protocols." And here comes the real twist. Within 30 minutes, data was recovered from the drives. The videos stored? All encrypted. But the titles of the files? Those weren't. Here's a sampling. Windsor arrival, Phase 1. Courtyard conflict. BCAM. Trunk reveal raw. Air versus spare, live loop. Contingency drop, Diana Echo. Yes, that last one hit the hardest. Diana Echo. It was a clear psychological reference. Someone had designed this operation to parallel, even exploit, the legacy of Princess Diana. The emotional weight, the public sympathy, the raw trauma. And if those tapes ever got out, edited into a new narrative, it would be devastating. Not just for the royal family, but for Harry himself. Because he wouldn't be the hero. He wouldn't be the wounded son seeking truth. He'd be the weapon. Back in the SUV, Harry received another message. Same blocked sender. This one with a photo. It showed him, hugging Charles at the palace gates just days earlier. But the angle? It was above, as if taken by drone. Caption: "We've got the closure. Just say when." Harry's hands shook. He turned to his assistant. "Who has access to my calendar?" The assistant blinked. "What do you mean?" "Who knew exactly when I'd arrive before I sent the message to my father?" Silence. Then the assistant whispered, "Only 2 people. Name them." He did. One was a PR associate in California. The other? A UK-based contact Harry had trusted for years. Someone recently hired by Meghan. Cut to the palace and folded her arms. Her voice was tight. "We need to speak with every single person who touched that vehicle before it reached the gates." William nodded. But something in his expression had changed. The fury was gone, replaced by something worse. Guilt. "And Charles?" He sat down, slowly, his voice distant. "I cast out my son, and he wasn't the threat. But the damage was done. Harry was gone. The world believed the worst. And the tapes, wherever they were, still existed. Somewhere. In someone's hands. Ready to be cut. Framed. Sold. And when they finally surfaced, The headlines wouldn't say Prince Harry used. They'd say, Prince Harry caught again. Because in the court of public opinion, perception is reality. And once you've been framed, you're guilty forever. What's the one room in the British monarchy where secrets are supposed to be sacred? Not the throne room, not the royal bedrooms, not even the private vaults beneath Windsor Castle. It's the Queen's drawing room. That cozy, understated chamber in the East Wing. The very place where Elizabeth II held her most intimate conversations, met privately with prime ministers, soothed royal tempers, and occasionally, just occasionally, let her guard down. That room was tradition wrapped in wallpaper. And if that room was compromised, if that space, so personal, so steeped in royal sanctity, had been bugged, then nothing in the palace was sacred anymore. Nothing. And that's precisely the bombshell that dropped next. It began with a quiet ping. Deep within the palace's subterranean IT command center, a place few outsiders even know exists, a senior tech analyst by the name of Orla Matthews noticed something. A routine signal sweep had turned up anomalous frequency bouncing in a narrow corridor just east of the Queen's drawing room. Initially, it seemed like nothing. But then, the pattern repeated. At regular intervals. Every 47 minutes, a pulse, short, encrypted, disguised to mimic HVAC frequency noise. Except Orla had seen this before. Once. In a training scenario involving NATO bugging simulations. This wasn't airflow. It was a beacon. A signal pinging for pickup. Something buried in that room, or adjacent to it, was alive. She ran a deeper diagnostic, cross-referenced with power usage logs. There it was. A power drain so slight it could have been mistaken for a faulty outlet. Except it had started exactly 3 days ago. The same day Harry landed in the UK. The same day the private reconciliation began. Coincidence? Not anymore. Orla immediately radioed palace security. 3 minutes later, the corridor was cleared. 15 minutes after that, William was notified. He was in the middle of reviewing the encrypted contents of the second surveillance case, still rattled from the Asset B discovery. When he heard drawing room bug, he turned to stone. No one goes in, he said flatly. No one but me. He arrived within 7 minutes, and was already there. So was Orla. They stood outside the ornate double doors, hand-carved oak, trimmed in gold. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. A room designed for absolute privacy. Now at the center of a technological betrayal, William exhaled. Where exactly? Orla tapped her iPad. Back wall. Behind the bookshelf. Mid-level. The signal's faint, likely embedded in wood or plaster. And nodded. Let's find it. They stepped inside. The air was thick with silence. The kind of silence that felt personal. Historical. Betrayed. William's eyes swept the room. The floral curtains. The Queen's beloved ceramic corgi figurines. The faint scent of lavender still lingering from a sachet tucked behind a cushion. It was like walking into memory. And now it was tainted. Orla led them to the bookshelf. A grand, curved structure containing decades of family photos, leather-bound Churchill memoirs, and state gifts from visiting dignitaries. They removed the books slowly, shelf by shelf. Then, Asin tapped lightly on the middle panel. Hollow. William crouched, fingers brushing against the seams. He pressed gently. Click. A panel opened, and nestled inside, a black disc, no bigger than a pound coin. Flat, circular, matte. It didn't beep, didn't glow, but it pulsed. Orla leaned in. Direct line mic ultra-thin, possibly 128-bit encrypted. It's military grade. William stared at it. His throat tightened. This room is where I last spoke to Gran. The night before she died, and put a hand on his shoulder. And now someone has that recording. The realization was nuclear. If that mic had been live during the last 72 hours, it would have captured everything. The King's private consultations, discussions about the will, updates on Kate's recovery, even William's own conversations with his children, who had spent time there earlier that week. This wasn't just betrayal. This was violation. But then came the bigger question. Who put it there? Because Harry hadn't stepped foot inside this room during his visit. That was verified. He'd remained in the West Wing, per Charles's instructions. So unless he'd hired someone to break in, highly unlikely given the layered security, this wasn't Harry's doing. And if it wasn't Harry, then who? Orla unplugged the device and began scanning its cache. Some data was retrievable. The last file's metadata was chilling. File name: Queen Echo _ RM31. Date modified, the previous night. Duration: 28 minutes. Subject: internal royal discussions, voice samples identified. Charles, William, and male unknown, female unknown, and leaned in. Play the last 20 seconds. Orla hesitated, then hit play. The audio crackled. Then, Charles's voice. If Harry's truly innocent, we failed him worse than I feared. Then William. He's not innocent. He just doesn't know what he's become. And then another voice. Female. Sharp. British. Cold. Not Meghan. Not Camilla. Not Kate. Unfamiliar. That's enough. End capture. Move to Protocol Swan. Silence. Protocol Swan. End's brow furrowed. I've heard that term before. William looked at her. Where? She didn't answer immediately. Then she whispered. It's from Mum's notes. Diana. Cut to a dusty archive drawer in Anne's quarters. She pulled a folder marked D/1993 Confidential. Inside, a single journal entry. If anything happens, tell William about Protocol Swan. They'll try to bury it, but he'll understand. The entry was dated July 4th, 1993. Weeks after Diana's infamous car chase in central London, where she believed she was being followed not by paparazzi, but by intelligence operatives. Back then, it was dismissed as paranoia. Now, it was a possible blueprint. William sat down, shaken. If this went as deep as Diana suspected, then Harry wasn't just being recorded. He was being handled, moved, directed, manipulated. He turned to Orla. Can you trace the female voice? Orla nodded slowly. We'll run a sample analysis. Might take hours. Maybe days. William looked up at the ceiling. Jaw tight. Eyes glinting. Then quietly. Someone's trying to finish what they started with Diana. And said nothing. But she didn't have to. They both knew the feeling. That old, cold truth. The thing no one ever said out loud. That maybe, just maybe, Diana's accidents weren't accidents at all. And now it was happening again. Just in a newer, sleeker, more digital form. The Queen's drawing room, once a sanctuary, was now a crime scene. But the real horror? The rest of the palace hadn't even begun to be searched yet. And as William left the room, a terrifying thought hit him. What if this wasn't the first device? What if it was just the only one they'd found? It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was infiltration. Someone inside the palace, someone with clearance, access, and a carefully masked agenda, had been feeding information to an outside source. But not just leaks to tabloids. Not just whispers to social media grifters or opportunistic journalists. This was organized, coordinated, and worst of all, deliberate. Because it wasn't just about what was seen. It was about what was captured, what was recorded, what was exported, and who was feeding it, piece by piece, to a third party. A third party with $1 billion incentive to keep the royal wounds wide open. Netflix. The palace had long suspected there were loose lips. The occasional gossip. The staffer who took a side-channel call from a Daily Mail freelancer. The cousin who posted just a little too much about the summer gathering at Balmoral. But this was something else entirely. This wasn't a one-off betrayal. This was a pipeline. And once they uncovered it, it would lead to a face that had been smiling inside the palace for months. It started with the hard drives. After discovering the hidden surveillance device in the Queen's drawing room and decrypting metadata from the second Pelican case, the one labeled under the code name Asset B, Orla Matthews and her tech team focused on one anomaly. The pattern of export timestamps. There were dozens of them, each perfectly spaced, batch-timed, and geo-stamped with routing pings from inside the palace network. Someone wasn't just placing microphones. They were downloading and transmitting footage from within the firewall. That meant one thing. The mole wasn't a visitor. They weren't a technician. They were staff. A palace insider. Trusted. Cleared. Invisible. The files followed a schedule. Morning briefings, mid-afternoon tea breaks, late-night corridor meetings. Every moment was monitored, then repackaged into curated scene dumps that were eerily similar to reality TV formats. Labels like Charles solo _ pre-meeting, Wills versus Harry _ staircase, Camilla _ reacts _ library, Kate recovery _ night cam 01. Each one meticulously logged, dated, marked, then forwarded. But here's what blew the case open. Each data dump bore a hidden watermark, buried inside the binary. 3 letters. RIA. At first, it meant nothing. But then Orla remembered a staff nickname she'd heard once. A nickname given to one of the newer comms interns, brought in to modernize Palace messaging under the advisement of a U.S.-based consultancy. That intern's name? Ria Imani Allen, a polished, well-spoken media graduate from NYU. Hired 6 months ago under a trial contract through a Royal Communications Diversity Initiative. On paper, a public relations assistant. In practice, a ghost. No selfies, no interviews, no family history, just a spotless LinkedIn, a few flattering press quotes, and access to some of the most secure corridors in Windsor. William's first reaction when Orla dropped the file on his desk? He scoffed. Impossible. She works with Camilla's team. She's harmless. But, and was in the room too. And she didn't scoff. She leaned forward. She's always in the room, isn't she? Quiet. Watching. Taking notes. Orla nodded. She's been on site for every major meeting over the last 2 months. And always near the export routers when we ran security pings. William's smile faded. Anne's voice hardened. She's the mole. Security moved fast. Ria was summoned under the pretense of assisting with a digital press release about upcoming royal engagements. She arrived casually, iPad in hand, blazer crisp, no nerves, until she noticed the guards, then the chill, then the silence, and the room full of senior royals. Charles, William, Anne, all staring, all waiting. William stepped forward first. Do you know why you're here, Miss Allen? She nodded, slowly, but didn't answer. He motioned to Orla. She clicked a remote. A screen behind her lit up. Split-screen videos began to play. One showed Charles pacing alone in the West Library. Another showed Kate, weeks ago, adjusting a blanket while seated on a couch. Another showed William and in a low-toned discussion near the balcony. None of this had ever been recorded officially. None of it should exist. And yet, here it was. Ria blinked. Just once. Then said quietly, "It's bigger than you think." And stood suddenly. And what exactly is it? Ria paused, then answered. The brand. That word echoed. William stepped back. What brand? Ria looked at him calmly now, as if she was the one holding the power. The royal family. But not the institution, the narrative. The behind-the-curtain story. The one people actually want. William's jaw tightened. You mean the suffering? The infighting? The weakness? Ria smiled faintly. The truth. Or at least, a version of it compelling enough to sell. She explained, bluntly, surgically, that her role hadn't begun as infiltration. She was initially recruited by a third-party firm with ties to Netflix and other media conglomerates. Her job? Observe, listen, gather tone. But when internal palace Wi-Fi privileges gave her access to the private server logs, she saw an opportunity. Install a listener, route pings, capture data, hear it, send. And in exchange, 6 figures, and a producer credit on a new limited series in development. A docudrama hybrid codenamed House of Echoes. William couldn't speak. Charles stood up. You betrayed your oath. You used us. Ria smiled again, this time without warmth. You made it so easy. Because the walls aren't as thick as you think. And the cracks? You made those yourselves. Then she dropped one last bombshell. I didn't work alone. Silence. She turned to William. You have another leak. Not staff. Not tech. She tapped her temple. Family. The room froze. And whispered, who? Ria shook her head. That's the best part. You'll never see it coming. Then she was escorted out. Hours later, Orla's team confirmed that Ria's equipment had been transmitting to 3 separate offshore servers, 2 in Germany, 1 in Ontario. And one of the server names? Gateway.02. William stared at it. His heart dropped. Because those initials weren't random. Meghan Markle. But the path didn't lead back to Montecito. Not directly. Because when Charles's intelligence team probed the German relay, they found a backdoor login, used only once, registered to an account under the name T Holdings. T. Trevor Engelson, Meghan's ex-husband. A name long buried. A history long erased. And yet now, it had surfaced, at the very center of the leak pipeline. And whatever role he played, it wasn't finished yet, because a second server still hadn't been decrypted. And when they finally cracked it open, It would contain a file that even William wasn't prepared for. A file titled, Project Lilibet. What if the thing that unravels a kingdom isn't a scandal in the tabloids, but a folder? Just a plain, silent, sealed folder, pulled out from the foam casing of a film equipment box in the trunk of Prince Harry's unregistered vehicle. No camera flash, no viral tweet, no dramatic leak, just a wax-sealed envelope. And yet, when the guards saw it, they stopped breathing, because that wax stamp, the one imprinted in dark red and pressed clean, wasn't just any symbol. It bore the unmistakable crest of Kensington Palace. And worse, it was William's personal seal. Let's rewind 10 seconds. The last camera case had been unlatched under William's watchful eye. He wasn't leaving anything to protocol. No staff oversight. No half measures. You open them now. All of them, he'd snapped. 2 guards knelt beside the final case. They removed foam padding, audio equipment, chargers, adapters. Then something shifted, just slightly, underneath. A corner of paper. Just barely peeking through. Not taped. Not protected. As if it had been slid in hurriedly. Almost like it wasn't meant to be there at all. One of the guards carefully lifted it out. And there it was, the sealed folder. No name. No return address. But the wax? Clean. Precise. Kensington's crest. William's own. Harry's face dropped the moment he saw it. He didn't speak. Didn't blink. Didn't breathe. And that, more than anything, confirmed it. This wasn't part of the security team's kit. This wasn't something Netflix had mailed in. This wasn't an accidental mix-up. This was something far more delicate, more deliberate. William stepped forward, nostrils flaring. Where did you get this? No answer. He took another step. Harry, where did you get this? Still silence. A single bead of sweat trailed down Harry's temple. Then came the words.